Welcome to my latest channel update video. Now, quite a lot has been going on over the last few months, so those of you who are regular followers, regular viewers will no doubt be well aware of that. Specifically with the channel itself in regards to some games, notably Elite Dangerous, but also in regards to life as well. We took a big 300-mile move to a new house from Kent all the way up here to North Yorkshire. I've spoke about it previously, but yeah, that's all complete now. Lovely location here. And the new studio means that I'm back to live streaming again. You may have seen that last Saturday. A new live stream this Saturday as well. Open to debate on what we're going to cover there. Probably Microsoft Flight Simulator, but maybe Trigon, a space story. So I'll leave that up to you potentially. Just let me know in the comments section. Of course, these videos are all about Patreon and YouTube channel members, those who support the channel. Always thank you very much for doing that. Very much appreciated. And as a way of saying thank you, I like to release these videos. Basically, it's a Q&A section. Members, Patreon supporters can submit questions and we address those topics throughout the video. So again, thank you very much for the ongoing support there. It does mean the world to me. And if you want to show a bit of support, if you want to help out there or ever thought of checking it out, do have a look at the link below. You can either click on the YouTube channel's member option there, just click join, or take a look at the link to Patreon. Okay, so moving on very rapidly to the questions that have been brought up this time. Unfortunately, no questions from YouTube members this month. If you do want to leave questions, you can of course do those if you are a member over on the community section there on YouTube. But we've got three separate points here over on Patreon, so we'll start with this one from Mike. Now, he says there are always a lot of great quality of life and feature suggestions on the official Elite Dangerous forums, but Frontier never seem to acknowledge them. From your knowledge of Frontier, do you think this is just because they set out their own feature roadmap that some time ago they're working through, or could it be something else? As an aside, my own suggestion list is right here, and yes, that is a massive monster list of quality of life suggestions, some of them very good indeed. Of course, the scientific missions and the exploration missions really do stand out to me, but that's because I'm an explorer at heart. So, well, why do Frontier ignore these, or seemingly ignore these? I think that's what you're getting at. Well, unfortunately, I can't speak on behalf of Frontier. I can only speak from my experience as a player from, what is it at this point, 8 years of playing Elite Dangerous. So yeah, a surprisingly long time at this point. So, why do Frontier seemingly ignore, or at least not acknowledge, these type of quality of life suggestions? Well, that's the question, isn't it? Personally, I think it comes down to two separate things. The first is resources. I've spoken about that previously. The second, I believe, is that Frontier do have a vision for what Elite Dangerous is, and that's not necessarily the same vision of what players actually have. Now, once, many moons ago, Sandro Samako, at the time, lead designer for Elite Dangerous, has said that Elite Dangerous is all things to all players. And after reading many years' worth of comments and commentary from various players, I entirely agree with that. So from a development point of view, how do you develop something that is all things to all players? Very difficult. In fact, if we're being realistic about this, it's actually impossible, because there's some players out there that may, well, take for example exploration. Some players like me want Elite Dangerous to be a dedicated exploration game. There's a vast galaxy out there, 400 billion worlds worth of content, 400 billion systems worth of content, rather, trillions of worlds. And, well, how often are these updated? What type of new exploration content do we get? There were some new worlds with Odyssey, but unfortunately, at least for me, they didn't really live up to what I had hoped or my expectations. And expectations is really what it's all about. Frontier's attention, it seems, is not on exploration. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It just means that my vision of this particular aspect of the game is not in alignment with Frontier's vision. And I really think that's, at least in part, the case when it comes to many of the quality of life suggestions. Tie that together with development challenges as well as resources, maybe a lack of resources, and I think it kind of paints the picture and fills in the gaps. But obviously a lot of speculation there on my behalf, but honestly, that is my take. I'd like to say that over time perhaps Frontier will deliver additional quality of life suggestions that are taken from recommendations and suggestions from the players, and in fact from time to time that does happen. Although unfortunately not as often or as quick as I would like to see, and perhaps not as often as many other players would like to see. So yeah, there's my particular perspective on that. Moving on to a point here from Piter. Space games that are economy and user-driven have always interested me. Making your own parts, making ships, etc., buying, selling and building your assets and really feeling the consequences of your actions give me a lot of satisfaction. For example, I would love to be a part of EVE Online, but there are often already big economies in these kinds of games. Don't these games become more and more inaccessible for the individualistic gamer the longer they run? The player who doesn't have hours in a day to play. What can you still contribute, and is there still room for small players? And does this not mean that these kinds of games can no longer attract new players in the long run? Given that EVE Online has been around for so long, I suspect it isn't, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So yeah, EVE Online has been around for a long while now, very, very close to 20 years at this particular point, and it does keep attracting new players, although with regard to that, CCP are really having to go out their way at this point to try and keep maintaining and attracting new players. Not an easy task, especially for well-established games, largely for the reasons that you've already mentioned, although not necessarily just in specific to economy, but also into other areas of progress within the game. And this really presents a problem for developers of these types of games. If you make the game more accessible, you kind of downgrade and diminish what other players have achieved over the past decades of play, or at least that's how some players may see it. Whilst on the other hand, if you don't make the game increasingly accessible, then you risk pushing away potential new players. It's a balance that I don't envy any developer trying to achieve. Now, as you point out there, the individualistic gamer. Now, by that I assume you mean players who like to go it alone, so lone wolves, or however you want to phrase that. If that's the case, that is very like me, then I'm not really the type of player that likes to sign up to big corporations or big guilds. I like to try and make as much of a go at it myself as possible. Now, in EVE Online specifically, this is very, very difficult. You can get so far, but at some point you will reach pretty much a brick wall and you will have to join a corporation if you want to, really go out and experience the extreme depths of the game. I think it's a little bit different when it comes to Elite Dangerous. Here, it's more than possible to experience almost every aspect of the game by purely being a solo player. However, Elite Dangerous doesn't fit the category of game that you're actually describing there. It's not about building up assets, it's not about making ships, making parts and then selling them. That is purely pretty much within the realms of EVE Online. I can't think of too many other space games out there that fit that sort of category or specific niche. Perhaps the best example that would be great for individualistic players would be X4 Foundations. These games, the X series, are very, very good when it comes to that. Immense consequences there for any single action you have there, but also the full capabilities of building up massive sprawling empires. Not sure if that's something you've ever taken a look at, but I'd highly recommend them. Of course, they're not online games, they are single or lone player games, but sometimes, especially for this type of thing you're describing there, it may just be the ticket you're looking for. Right, now on to a next subject, a different subject entirely here, by Phil. I've been trying to figure out what the perfect space game would be like, while still being practical. Visuals, exploration, scale, narrative, choice. What are your key ingredients, and which games do you think have come the closest? So that's a really big question, and it largely depends on what you're seeking with a space game. It kind of touches on the initial point early on made by Mike as well, where I said Elite Dangerous is all things to all players. Technically, that's true, I do agree with that point, but it can't actually be realistically true, and no one game can be all things, although there are some games, such as Star Citizen, which seem to be attempting just that. But ultimately, whether a game is a best game at anything really depends on the angle you're coming from. Regarding a space game, would it be if you're a PvP pilot? Do you really enjoy combat? Are you into bounty hunting, mercenary work? Do you want to just go track down other players and be the best combat pilot out there? Or would it be a exclusive PvE game? Are you really loving PvE? Do you want to go out there and build up an empire, make a difference to whatever other empires are established within the game? Perhaps you're an explorer, an avid explorer, and want to seek out pretty much anything that exists out there, new life, new scenarios, new planets, new worlds, or just discover ancient dead civilizations. There's a whole lot which could fit into that category. Now, all of these aren't mutually exclusive. There are areas which would overlap, and no reason why not after all. But personally, I do feel the best space game would be one dedicated to any particular activity, but that wouldn't be the best space game for everyone. So my complete idealistic best space game ever, the whole concept here, very hard to describe actually because it's such a big thing, but it would be founded in exploration. And that means a vast galaxy, a vast game world. Could be the size of Elite Dangerous, an entire Milky Way. Could be the size of No Man's Sky, pretty much quintillions of planets. Or perhaps more realistically, more idealistic for me, it would be founded on something like Space Engine. Now you see in all the visuals of Space Engine throughout this video, very realistic simulation of not only our own Milky Way, but pretty much every other galaxy out there. I think there's something like 100 billion different galaxies here. More or less everything we can see within the observable universe, I do believe. So what we got here are gas giants, ring systems, we've got comets, black holes with accretion disks, there's huge volumetric nebulas, many of them are different styles, multitudes of different types of planets, all of them very much visually distinct. But how would you turn this into a game? Well, for me, you would have to create gameplay around all these space phenomena that you can actually discover. So essentially, think some of the classic episodes of Star Trek and Star Trek The Next Generation. So not the ones centered around conflict or combat, but rather the ones centered around space phenomena and dealing with, well, the unknown and the mysterious. So a very vague description of my ideal space game there, but it would have to be about space exploration at its very core. Its actual identity would have to be founded right there, be fundamental to everything that comes after it. So yeah, pretty vague there, I totally appreciate that. Not a game designer by any means, but I can certainly give a bit of an idea of what it is I would like to see. Of course, what I would want from a space game is very different from what many other people would want from a space game, so do let me know in the comments section below. What would your ideal space game be? Would it centre around exploration? Would it centre around combat, conflict, or empire building, or maybe a combination of all of these? And incidentally, the reason my idealistic space game doesn't have a combination of different gameplay mechanics is because ultimately I feel they'd all get in the way of each other. But anyway, do let me know your ideal space game in the comments section below. What would really work for you? So that's the various questions and subjects that have been brought up for this particular video. Pretty interesting ones to say the least, but of course I'd like to see more. So next time out, hopefully we get a few more questions over there on Patreon and on YouTube members in the community there. Also, whilst we're here, don't forget I will be live streaming this Saturday, so do keep an eye out for that. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.